Welcome to the channel. Enjoy over 6 years of videos, live streams, and more. And hold onto your butts. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
That Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop, ever, until you are dead.
The Terminator, released in 1984, and stars Arnold Schwarzenegger, Michael Biehn, and Linda Hamilton. It's the sci-fi adventure that helped define the genre, and set the bar for action/horror movies going forward. A fairly simple and original concept not only gave cinematic storytelling a massive boost in popularity, but it evolved, and since then has grown into a franchise, spanning 6 feature films, comic books, video games, and even a spin-off television series. It is what I consider to be the gold standard in cinema, and the closest mankind will ever come to a perfect movie, when you take into account all aspects that make up a motion picture. Let's talk about The Terminator, and I'll give you my honest takes, as unpopular as they may be. The movie kicks off with a look into what remains of Los Angeles in the year 2029, as a war rages on between the machines and what is left of mankind. In this flash forward, the film immediately establishes a world devastated by nuclear conflict, and in the best of ways, sets a foundation for the plot that would make the premise simple and interesting to follow. We transition and are thrown back to 1984 in the same location. As a trash truck driver makes its rounds, the wind picks up, and after an electrical storm fills the area, and the driver bails, a sphere of light appears and vanishes on the asphalt. What is left in its place is a nude human figure in a crouched position. The figure rises to reveal our main actor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, sporting a stone-cold expression as he looks over his surroundings. A few thugs gather on a nearby playground, and after messing around for a second, can't help but notice the naked gentleman heading their direction. To be fair, that would be difficult to miss. The Three Goons are played by the late great Bill Paxton, Brian Thompson, and Brad Reardon. They mess with the wrong nudist on the wrong night, as with a few brief but swift movements, 2 of the 3 are freed from their mortal forms, and the 3rd surrenders. Good move, bud. We shift scenes to a dark alley, still in LA, where another storm picks up in the same way as before, this time dropping a body from the sky in a painful way. The human form rises in pain, and we get our first look at actor Michael Biehn. He steals the pants off a homeless man in close proximity. In the most unrealistic point in the film, the Los Angeles police arrive immediately on the scene. Catching the officer off guard, our frantic guest disarms the cop, and requests the date and the specific year, in a very intense and classic moment, leaving the officer befuddled at the question. The man doesn't get his answer before backup arrives, and is chased into a clothing outlet. He is lucky to find fitting shoes, a trench coat, and stealthily collects a shotgun from the unmanned police car, making his way off the scene. Our newly outfitted gentleman enters a phone booth, finds Sarah Connor amongst the names on the register, tears out the page, and leaves. We are then introduced to Sarah Connor, played by Linda Hamilton, as she heads into another day working as a waitress.
Guard it for me, big bands.
After she is greeted by her co-workers, we transition once again to the imposing man who took out the thugs earlier on. He approaches the driver's side of a Chevrolet Impala, taking out the window with a single punch. If it hasn't already been established, this should indicate to the audience that this is not an ordinary guy. After he hotwires the car, we briefly return to Sarah, who is experiencing a rough day on the job.
Look at it this way, in 100 years, who's gonna care?
And immediately shifts back to the new car thief. now acquiring firearms at a local gun store. I think it's fair to say that unless he was carrying US currency in his hair upon arrival, he'd lack the proper funds to purchase any weapons. But he has another method. Having completed his transaction, he too looks Sarah Connor up in the phone book. Visits a home where a different Sarah Connor answers the door, and after confirming her identity, she is dispatched in a brutal fashion. We get another scene transition to our original Sarah as her co-workers rush her into the back of the restaurant, where they watch a news broadcaster break the news of the new murder. Fellow waitress Nancy follows with,
"You're dead, honey."
Hardly the time, Nance, but I appreciate you trying to lighten the mood. When night comes, the man who appeared in the alley from earlier hotwires an abandoned vehicle of his own at a construction site. Exhaustion hits, and a vision gives us a better look at the impending war of metal and flesh. I love how this scene illustrates a very grim and gritty post-apocalyptic future, where not only are humans at an incredible disadvantage, but an early death, while common, is still something mankind can never get used to. We move from a horrific nightmare to a far more positive environment, where Sarah and her roommate Ginger, played by Bess Mora, prepare for date night at their apartment complex. When Ginger's date, Matt, played by Matt Rosovich, has a practical joke blow up in his face, we are sent to the local police station. There we are introduced to Lieutenant Traxler, played by Paul Winfield, and his partner Volkovich, played by Lance Henriksen. Another murdered Sarah Connor is discovered, and when our Sarah finds that she is the next entry in the phone book, the real paranoia kicks in, and she rushes into a club called Tech Noir in attempts to hide in a public and highly populated environment. After Ginger and Matt are slaughtered by our behemoth of a man, Sarah calls the police station, and Traxler tells her to stay inside until a squad car arrives. What follows is the sequence that turned me from a casual movie fan as a kid into a full-fledged film enthusiast. Sarah finds a table and awaits her escort. To no surprise, the not-so-gentle giant tracks her down, and we get to experience the most intense 42 seconds in the history of cinema. Beauty is spotted by the beast, and a millisecond before the maniac can pull the trigger, the hobo thief counterpart emerges, brandishing his stolen shotgun, and goes to town, blasting the gargantuan gas bag several times until he drops to the dance floor. In one of, if not my favorite reveal in a film, what should have been a very dead bodybuilding psychopath rises to his feet and fires back, making it 100% clear that this is no human. As Sarah attempts to flee, the monster shoots down a patron, who falls dead on top of her. Once again, a brief moment before Sarah is executed, our trench-coated savior unloads 5 shells into the giant, sending him through a pane of glass and out of Tech Noir. As Sarah's protector proclaims,
"Come with me if you want to live."
the seemingly indestructible predator rises, leaving a face of terror painted across Sarah's face, and the two flee the club. In an incredibly tense chase sequence, Sarah is rushed down an alley with the unknown man, being pursued closely by the bulletproof brute. They get to a car, and a carefully timed blast from the man's shotgun strikes the sweet spot of another vehicle, creating an explosion, cutting the beast off from its prey. To Sarah's shock, this doesn't slow it down. Emerging from the fiery wreck, the smoky pursuer bashes his entire arm through the windshield, grabbing Sarah by her shirt. This, just seconds before her defender spins the car, throwing the monster from the vehicle. One thing I loved about this segment was the practicality of the windshield effect. They had rigged a steel arm to Arnold's real arm, which let them create the brake moment without the use of CGI. As the two flee the scene, an officer pulls to the side and radios in the car's details. Little does he know that the fallen figure has risen again, smoke rising from his body. Dispatching with the policeman, the lunatic takes his vehicle and continues the chase. At this point, the film cuts back and forth between Sarah's car and the police vehicle, giving us contrasting perspectives. In one, we get the frantic dialogue between Sarah and the mystery man, while the other shows us a calm, collected, and cold demeanor of an emotionless predator. This is an awesome way to build tension and uncertainty in the audience's mind, creating the right amount of discomfort and keeping us fully invested. Sarah learns the man's name, Kyle Reese, Sergeant TechCom BN38416, as he explains his mission to protect her from termination. The context is laid out as the brood in pursuit is described as a Terminator, a machine designed by CyberDan Systems under the Model 101, which would end up being an interesting concept carried into the future films, and has always made me curious about the defining characteristics that made each model distinct. But that's a topic I'll save for another video. Usually I don't care for exposition dumps in the entertainment sphere, but this sequence does it right, building the drama and having Kyle aggressively give Sarah as much information as possible within a brief moment, knowing full well that there isn't a lot of time to do so, makes this scene incredibly effective. The two stop inside a parking garage, staying low as they plan their next move, and giving Kyle a few more minutes to clarify everything in what I consider to be the best monologue in cinematic history.
That Terminator is out there. It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. And it absolutely will not stop. Ever. Until you are dead.
Unlucky for Kyle and Sarah, the Terminator finds its way to the parking garage, with indirect assistance of the LAPD, and the chase resumes. After a brief exchange of shoddy blasts between Reese and the machine, Sarah hits the brakes, and the Terminator makes friends with a wall.
Fuck.
The police, not being far behind, arrest Kyle, Sarah, but are unable to find the 101. At this point, we transition to the police station, as Sarah meets Traxler, Volkovich, and Dr. Silberman, played by Earl Bowen, a criminal psychologist, moments before he begins his evaluation of Kyle. While the doc questions Reese, we get to witness the graphic results of the earlier confrontation, where the Terminator can repair injuries sustained in an eerie scene with some pretty amazing practical effects. The mechanical menace dons a pair of fancy shades to cover its exposed eye, and wastes no time, leaving the same way it came in. Back at the precinct, Sarah is given Kyle's professional diagnosis.
He's a loon.
In a cleverly shot moment, Silberman walks right past Arnie as his pager goes off, redirecting his attention long enough so that he doesn't actually see the machine make its way inside, which I like to imagine was a subtle nod to technology's stranglehold on humanity. And while here it's coincidental, it shows how easily a commonly used device can control the average person's attention at any given time. The Terminator claims to be a friend of Sarah, and after being denied entry, he delivers the iconic
I'll be back.
Leaves the building, and seconds later, it drives a Plymouth Grand Fury through the same entrance. Our villain emerges from the vehicle, dual-wielding firearms, and wastes no time hunting Sarah, as it systematically eliminates every police officer in the building. Kyle finds Sarah in a cleverly framed sequence. Faking out the audience, and whether it works or not, indicates to the viewer that the Terminator may have found her. The two keep low and narrowly escape the building, as the machine continues its pursuit. Kyle and Sarah eventually reach an area where they push their newly acquired car off the road, and find shelter under a bridge. Here, Sarah asks for additional details about her future son, and manages to get sleep as Kyle speaks about humanity's war against the machines. We get an entertaining scene that shares Kyle's experience, and does so with exposition without dialogue. We get to see and learn that dogs are used to spot Terminators. Following a brief and comical interaction between our assassin and a member of the hotel staff,
Got a dead cat in there or what?
Fuck you, asshole.
the context offered about future dogs would make the next scenes a bit more interesting, and in a way even tense. Reese and Sarah find their way to a motel, and Kyle leaves temporarily to pick up some supplies, giving Sarah a little something to defend herself should the situation arise. Unfortunately, while Reese is away, Sarah calls her mother to keep her from worrying, and once again the Terminator uses its voice-changing function to imitate her. This implies that Sarah's mom has been taken out, and the machine has once again located its target. When Kyle gets back, he and Sarah use some groceries to delicately create makeshift pipe bombs, When night comes, Sarah and Kyle share a tender moment together, while simultaneously keeping Reese's mission at the center focus. The two embrace in a short romance scene, which we find out eventually would play a much larger role going into the future. This is a piece of writing that never gets enough credit in my opinion, as this moment takes Kyle's attention away from his task, leaving an opening for the Terminator to sneak up on them. Lucky for the two, the guard dog identifies it, barking up a storm, and that gives the couple enough time to flee the motel. They manage to slow down the machine with a truck, but it continues its pursuit by way of motorcycle. This begins another fast-paced chase sequence, where Kyle and the Terminator exchange attacks, Reese using the pipe bombs, while the machine opens fire. The assassin gets the upper hand when Kyle is struck by a bullet, ultimately leading Sarah to take her eye off the road and flips the car. All of this while their pursuer suffers a similar fate, with an additional truck to the face, that is. While the chase is brought to a sudden stop, it doesn't last long, as the Terminator rises to its feet, dispatches the truck driver, confiscates the vehicle,
Get out.
and resumes its pursuit. Sarah frantically pulls Kyle from the wrecked car and starts running. Reese calls for Sarah to run ahead, knowing that the machine would prioritize eliminating her over him, and he improvises, placing one of his remaining pipe bombs into the tanker's rear cylinder. Moments later, a massive explosion blows up the truck and the Terminator at the same time. Kyle emerges from the smoke and reunites with Sarah, as the two fall to their knees in triumphant exhaustion. While everyone loves getting a breather, once again it is short-lived, as the machine emerges from the flaming wreckage, and we get to see the metal monster for the first time with its false skin burnt from its frightening exoskeletal form. You know what that means. The chase is back on, as the Terminator limps after Kyle and Sarah. The two take refuge inside a building which, crazily enough, is set up to manufacture hydraulic-powered machines. Reese activates some of the systems in an attempt to create interference in their foe's tracking system. While it is effective for a brief time, Kyle and Sarah eventually run into the Terminator for a final showdown. With a newly acquired steel pipe, Reese takes a few swings at the machine's head, which appears to do little damage, and a mighty metal backhand drops Kyle immediately. With his last bit of energy, Reese lights up his final pipe bomb, thrusts it into the rib frame of his enemy, and a massive blast tears the Terminator apart. Sarah, while severely wounded by some of the flying metal pieces, crawls over to check Kyle, whose life expired from the final conflict. But it's not over. The top half of the Terminator lifts itself from the floor with a scare, and the real final chase commences. Sarah drags herself away from the machine through a hydraulic press, in a sequence that would make anyone feel claustrophobic. And upon reaching the other end, she closes shut a gate to separate the two. That doesn't stop the metal menace from reaching its arms through the bars, in an effort to grip Sarah's throat. Grasping out, Sarah speaks the legendary line,
"You're terminated, fucker!"
hits the button, crushing the Terminator under the press, and we see the red glow from its eyes slowly fade away into nothing. Daylight comes, and an ambulance takes Sarah to a hospital, but not before seeing Kyle's body one last time. The next time we see our survivor, she drives up to a gas station and is visibly pregnant. Speaking into a recording device, it is made clear that Reese is the father. After a brief interaction with a boy that takes the same picture we saw earlier, the film ends on a final shot of Sarah driving into the distance, as a storm appears on the horizon, emphasizing on a powerful metaphorical aspect to an already superb conclusion. The Terminator is, in my opinion, the greatest film in the history of cinema. It takes the science fiction genre and combines a future war environment with the grounded reality of the past in a remarkable way. The characters feel real, and the writing makes you love and hate them in a way that feels natural. The dialogue is strong, and it creates levity to dramatic moments without feeling silly. The soundtrack has one of, if not the most incredible score in the history of cinema, and the film tells a tale that expands on a simple premise with perfection, and achieves what the creators set out to develop in the best of ways. It goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. The Terminator is absolutely brilliant.